All right, boys, we are back. We had a bit of a break last week, and the previous week there was a bit of a rerun of some clips of some past potties that were done, all specific and revolving around reverse diet and recovery phase. And a lot of people really, really enjoyed that. So if anyone hasn't listened to that yet, then definitely go back and listen to that episode, especially for those that are in prep at the moment. It's really, really good information for what to expect after your season is done. But how's everything going over there, Scotty?
Everything is going all right. I was just saying to you boys, I feel like I've gone back in the ages because my MacBook Pro had the unfortunate event of my cup of coffee last Sunday going all over it. And it was a very, very expensive mistake. And so I'm due to be getting it back today. So I'm just kind of counting down the hours, hopefully till I get it back. But other than that, everything's been pretty good. I'm this close to almost finishing my thesis. I've got a couple more people I've got to test. And then I feel like there's going to be a massive just relief. And then as soon as that's done, it's show week for NBA and we're straight into it.
Nice. How long is your thesis? Like how many words, pages are we expecting?
I actually don't know how many pages it is, but it's a lot of words. And equally, so you don't, nothing that's inside of the tables that I present is counted as words, but I haven't even done a word count off the top of my head. But usually with previous papers that I've written, I've had to usually try and shave them back because there usually is a threshold on what you can submit. But all I know is it's literally, I was dreaming about statistics in my head last night. You know, sometimes when you're just focusing on stuff nonstop, and I don't know what it was about, but I remember waking up thinking, I did a lot of thinking about like effect sizes and P ratios, and it's just, yeah, I'm looking forward to just being able to know that it's done. It just feels like I've got this huge cloud. Like I feel good about everything, but it's just the enormity of the task and just finalizing. Once I've finished testing everyone, I've got 2 more to go. Then I can finally run my statistics. The actual paper itself and the discussion's pretty much written. And then hopefully these last 2 second lot of tests don't completely fuck the trend that it's been going, because I'm writing it based on the trend. So I'm excited to be able to talk about that once we know for sure. But I was giving MG a bit of insight when we traveled on the weekend, just the way that it kind of has gone. And yeah, there's some really interesting findings thus far. But I'm actually, we've got an extension from the ethics committee past my submission to recruit more participants so we can try and get to that threshold of hopefully 50. So if anyone is out there that is eumenorrheic and has been lifting for over 3 years and wants to be a part of my study and is not taking oral contraceptive, then please reach out and get involved. But other than that, man, just looking forward to the season starting. We were obviously in Sydney last weekend. Went down to Wollongong, which was nice. The traffic in Wollongong was not nice, was it, MG?
We copped it, man. Right. We left so much time, and unfortunately, it just got the better of us right at the end on this one specific sort of entry into Wollongong. But I mean, we got jammed at a point where the view was phenomenal.
And I drove my first electric car.
Yeah.
Oh, no way. I haven't driven one yet.
You're not missing much, bro.
I've never been to Wollongong. How was it? Was it good?
It's awesome, man. Awesome. Good people, great place. Yeah, nice drive in.
That's awesome. That's exciting. And obviously the next day, so on Sunday, we had that massive mega workshop at Donna's studio in Victoria here. We had over 60 athletes attend, which is crazy. That's the size of a show. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah, and it was a little bit overwhelming, to be honest, in a sense of like how grateful we were for all those people to come to support us and to do our show. How did you find it, MG?
And when we were talking at the start, we gave a little bit of a speech about, you know, where we all fit in, and, you know, Donna and I had a couple of special moments of just asking the attendees like who was competing for the first time, and, you know, most of the room put their hand up, and then who's first time competing with the NBA, and again most of the room putting their hand up. So to get those sorts of numbers, and, you know, a lot of first timers and a lot of first time NBA competitors was so exciting and so special, and to be able to provide an experience like that and an insight as to, you know, what you can expect come show day for people who have never done it before was just so invaluable, man. It was just a very amazing morning.
What did you think, Scotty? I know afterwards we all kind of had a chat and we started to even think about like, wow, we've been to so many workshops recently over the last couple of weeks and months. We've seen some amazing physiques. What did you think about the potential that was there on Sunday?
I thought it was pretty good, man. I mean, we've been all over Australia the last, couple of months, just getting an idea of where all of the athletes, right, obviously at different stages of their journey. But I think Victoria is going to be representing the natural bodybuilding community very, very strongly. The standard on the weekend was fantastic, both girls and the guys. Obviously, there was a lot of guys. I mean, I thought the guys' workshop was heaving, and then as they were leaving, there was females just continued to flood through the door, and I was like, they still just keep coming. And it was really cool to see that we obviously were able, and we were really humbled to have that many people down there to be a part of the day. But yeah, the standard was great. I thought a lot of the girls as well, and couldn't get over the standard of the posing. For me, the amount of females there that were posing, and I have so much respect for the girls that actually start posing like from the start of their prep, their quarter turns. And this is something that a lot of the lads probably need to get behind, the time and dedication that the girls put into their posing. It shows like you wouldn't know that half the people in that room were beginners. I thought the posing was awesome, as was the standard. So I think at least for this VIC show, the standard's going to be very, very good.
Yeah, it was funny how Stewie brought up the fact that, the first VIC show NBA ever ran was like 15 or 20 odd competitors. And now we're looking at easily over 100 plus for this season. It not being a national, it's just a general state show is super exciting. It's going to be a really, really big first show for us for the season.
Man, I even told that story on Sunday about Donna's first NBA workshop, which was 3 people.
Yeah.
And that was the first NBA workshop ever in Melbourne, and 63 on the weekend. So yeah, that in itself was crazy. Shout out to all the girls who had, because some of the female competitors had driven from a long way away to be in attendance for that. We had some interstates actually fly down, and we had some, New South Wales border people come down as well. And of course, with the long drive and them all arriving, being in prep, being shredded to the bone, drinking water, the poor girls lining up for the bathroom because they all arrived at the same time. And, we're all busting as is to be expected when you're in prep. But yeah, they're all troopers, and the quality was freaking phenomenal, man. You guys would have seen me. I just kept kind of circling around the room, just to like get a really good view of where everyone was at and what their physiques were like. And yeah, it definitely stood out as, a 2-week out crowd. You could tell that everyone has been dieting really hard, and it's going to be a pretty awesome day come 2 weeks and a couple of days.
I know, it's coming around quick. And then this weekend, you guys are going to WA, right?
We are, yes. So Scotty and I fly out. It's funny because Sunday's obviously Father's Day, which is be my first Father's Day, but Scotty and I fly out. Our flight leaves at 7 a.m, and we get home at after 10 p.m. on Sunday night. So 8 hours on a plane, but it's a must do. And being that WA's a new state for us as a federation, we want to make sure that we can get across there and be able to provide the same experience that we provided everyone here in Melbourne on Sunday and in Wollongong on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Well, talking about dad life, how's everything going? And Talia should be about 6 months now, right?
Talia was 6 months on the 24th. So, yep, Talia was 6 months on, last Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
So, man, has it absolutely flew. She actually started solids this week. And we started, Meve's pretty, being obviously a clinical nutritionist, got a pretty good idea of the way that she wants this to go and has mapped it all out, as you guys know her well, would expect nothing less from her. But we started with avocado, and that went pretty well. We went from avocado to sweet potato, which Talia was neither here nor there for that. She liked cucumber. She didn't like celery. And today she had oats. And literally every mouthful, I've got a video I'll show you guys later. So she takes a spoonful in and she gags because it's like the first time she's had something, to kick off her gag reflexes. She swallows it. She nearly vomits. She grabs the next one, does it again, just repeats this cycle for about 5 minutes. So it's so funny watching them, learn. And, recently the thing that she's discovered, Scott, you probably remember, is she's really discovered her feet.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just so besotted by what her feet can do and how she can lift them up in the air and be like, my feet are there. So it's amazing, man. It's amazing.
I'm going to have to come around and get a cuddle real soon.
Oh, for sure, man. She's always happy and always chasing cuddles. So she's beautiful. But yeah, man, even at the workshops, it's so nice because I'll go to like a Wollongong or, a state that I've never been to before. And because of this amazing podcast and the amazing support that we have, I'll meet someone for the first time and I'll be like, how's Talia? How's dad life? So it's created, so much more excitement for me. and having all the listeners, ask me for feedback has just been incredible, and I just really appreciate it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Do you remember those times, Scotty?
I do, but more so now. I'm like, whenever I'm eating a meal, and this is something that you'll have to learn very, very quickly, bro. When you make something that you want to eat, you need to make the same thing for however many children you have, because you could be eating whatever. Oh, I haven't had cream of rice before, and he will have literally just had a bowl of cream of rice, and Harvey will want to eat my food, or they're just like little vultures. It goes so quickly. I do remember those days, but now all I get is, I'm hungry, and then you offer them something. No, I don't want that, and the only thing that they want is usually what you're eating. But no, it is cool, and it goes very quick. But I wanted to ask MT. I feel like you've been away. You've had a really busy couple of weeks. Is there anything new that has eventuated in your life? You went away on holiday. I obviously caught up with you on the weekend. How was your trip, bro? Was there anything momentous that occurred?
Yeah, so I was away in Thailand for about 8 days to just recharge and reset before an absolute massive season. Went away with Kiki, my partner, and I asked her a really, really big question. I went down on one knee when I asked that question, and she said yes. So I was incredibly happy. I was incredibly nervous. But yeah, it was definitely a special moment. When I proposed to her, we were in PP Island, which is absolutely beautiful. I don't know if you've ever been there, but basically you can walk out pretty far into the water on the beach, and you're still up to your knees pretty much. And we walked out there. We were just taking photos and taking it all in. I thought this is a good moment to do it, and also a good moment and a risky moment to maybe drop the ring in the water, but I didn't. So got down on one knee. Can't remember what I said. She doesn't remember what I said either. And I asked her the question. She said yes. So, and that was actually right pretty much at the start of the trip, I think day 3 in. And what was really funny is obviously all her friends, and even you guys, but all her friends were going, surely he's gonna ask her, surely he's gonna do it this trip. And we were playing on it a little bit because she was Snapchatting her friends every day, and we're like, nah, day 4 hasn't done it yet, day 5 hasn't done it yet, but I had already done it. So we're just laughing because they're responding, what's taking him so long?
What the hell's his problem, man? What's wrong with this guy? Trimboli actually dropped down on one knee, and he doesn't realize this, but the drone footage caught this. He dropped down on one knee in the water and said, quarter turn to the right.
But yeah, all her friends were hating on me. But then when we got back and we wanted to tell everyone in person, and they're like, "Oh, we hated you that whole trip. We thought you weren't going to do it." But no, it was good, and we're really happy and we're excited about the next chapter.
That's a weird.
Congratulations! We're really happy for you. No surprises, and we talk regularly about the future and all of our families, having the opportunity to spend a lot of time together, and this is definitely going to make that even more special. So,
I think the first thing you asked me after I told you, MG, you're like, so when are the kids?
Yeah, because I did say to you, if Meave and I can line up our second for your first, that's going to be, make things a lot easier for all of our travel and stuff. So
yeah, we'll see if we can coordinate things. Maybe Scotty, you can have a third. What do you reckon?
Maybe.
Is it on the card? Is it on the cards, or are we getting too personal now?
I don't know. Like, it's one of those things, man. As your kids get a bit older, we're out of that stage of, I don't want to, every time I say that, someone wakes up in the night and ruins my night of sleep. But usually, like, they're pretty good. They're a lot more they can get their own drinks and they get their own breakfast at 3 and 5. Never say never. I think if it was going to happen, it would be in the next year, because otherwise there's too much of a gap. But equally, when you leave all of those sleepless nights and the pooey nappies and all that behind, it is a nice new era. So it's almost like going back to the start. So not 100% ruled out, but equally,
so that's it.
Happy with 2 at the moment, I think. Yeah.
We'll see if we can get.
You're going to have another baby. MTs and Kicks are going to have one. So I'm looking forward to being, big Uncle Scott.
We'll get him plucky again, and
yeah,
well, this is the thing. You guys start passing around that baby, and my wife gets a hold of it. Maybe, but I don't know. We'll have to see.
We can make that happen.
Yeah,
exciting things for the future. All right, let's get into some questions, because we've obviously had a fair few, and I'm just going to run through the list like I normally do in no particular order, and we'll just go from there. So. Our first one was thoughts on weight caps being introduced for other classes, example, physique, bikini, etc. Now, I know, Scotty, you played a big part in creating the fitness weight caps for NBA men's fitness. So thoughts on weight caps or anything else? You think it's something that would ever be something to consider?
I think if you were going to do it, I mean, I think if we're talking about the men's divisions, bodybuilding and classic are probably excluded because they are more of the muscular-based divisions. I think you could probably add one to men's physique if you wanted to, but again, I think you would need to have some real-life parameters in place to be able to gauge what that actual that range looks like. So when I devised the men's fitness category, I used real life numbers. So for example, back in the day, I used to do men's fitness. So for example, if I was what my weight was, if you were having me at the top of that chain based on height, but also I've worked with lots of other men's fitness pros as well as fitness amateurs and using people of different heights. And then based on that, we came out with a format of what it would look like from essentially, 200 centimeters all the way down. And I think it's been really, really good. And that is important because it prevents someone, like say, for example, I did men's physique for NBA for the first time last season. If I decided to do men's fitness and you've got someone who's maybe just doing fitness for the first time and they're same height as me, 188 centimeters, and they're 65 kilos, and if I'm 85 kilos, it's not a fair playing field. But equally, I think in physique, you probably could do that. But I think for the most part, if you had someone that was like a bodybuilder in board shorts, usually the judging criteria, like straight away, they're not going to, that's happened in the past before. And the judges, they know, like Stewie and his team know what the look is. And if they don't fit that look, then they just won't place in the, in the top three. And that's equally communicated. There's been people in the past who have done classic and wanting to do physique. And he's just like, you won't place because your physique you're too big for that division or whatever it may be. But I think for that division, you definitely could. As far as girls concerned, again, I think maybe if you wanted to, but it's just so murky waters. Like you're talking about, female fitness, because we've had this conversation, MT, about, a couple of our athletes that are on the fringe. Like if we talk about Mads and Everin, who are obviously at the top end range of fitness in terms of size, muscularity, and conditioning. And then where that ceiling lies from, do they stay in that or do they move up to sort of figure? So I think you could probably look at doing that, but then there's other factors at bay that would need to probably come in. I think that the weight caps are probably better suited to the lads. But yeah, for me, I think having that fitness cap is good. And if you really wanted to, you could do one for physique if they felt that was a concern. But I mean, from what I can tell, this is before we were even involved with NBA, I haven't seen any of the men's physique winners that have been bodybuilders in board shorts. They're all just, fitting the criteria perfectly. And that's probably just a testament to Stu and all of the judging panel. Yeah. What do you think?
I think it's in ICN, they do not weight caps, but weight categories. I know for figure they do it. There's an under 52 kilo and an over 52 kilo. I believe they do it for men's physique too. Is there an under and over 70 kilo or something?
Under 70, I think it was under 72 or over, something like that. Yeah. And that's just more, it's just like adding another division basically. So it doesn't mean that you're ineligible to do something, but and they do it in bodybuilding too.
That's right. Yeah. So we're not creating caps, but we're creating divisions for people of that size, if that kind of makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which I think is okay to do, to be honest. I think when we start to do things like creating caps and height and weight classes and you have to fit in within a ratio and things like that, you have to do what you did, where you basically need to investigate, all the athletes that you have or that are compete at a high level, and then start to make that criteria. There's a fair bit involved and a lot of thought to go into it, and not sure if it's really needed unless you're getting people that are just too big for a certain category. We need to just rein it in. We need to give them some criteria and some boundaries of, if you're this big, you're too big. If you're within this range, then you're suited to the category. So I think for men's fitness, it makes sense. I don't know whether it makes sense for the other categories just yet. What do you think, MG? Anything else on that?
Yeah, I think the weight setup at the moment is spot on. I actually had this conversation with Stu off air like a little while ago, and Stu said something which was a good point. He's like, if you're thinking about it, say why you wouldn't introduce it for physique, and you use Scott as an example, right? Say Scott's an example of, say, your top level physique pro. Scott has a certain look, a certain aesthetic, certain shape. You could add 4 kilos to his frame, and he would still look like a top level physique guy because of his structure and your level of muscle. So the cap really wouldn't be relevant to physique as it is to fitness, where you're trying to limit the muscularity in size. So I thought that was a good point. But I think, having the weight classes makes it a little bit fairer. Ultimately, the lightest winner and the heaviest winner are still going to have to go up against each other in the overall, and that's what the judges are there for. That's the whole point. But I think the weight setup at the moment is the best solution.
This one's a little bit longer. And it has to do with cardio when you're short on time. So when you're short on time, what do you think is the best approach for scheduling in cardio and weight sessions? Should cardio be done before or after weights? Or in an ideal world, should you split them up, one in the morning, one in the afternoon? We've kind of spoken about this a little bit. Scotty, do you want to just go over it really quickly again?
Yeah, so with concurrent training, so incorporating cardiovascular training and weights training, it's better if you can to have a bit of a gap from a window perspective, more so from a cellular signaling perspective. So when we're doing cardio, we heighten certain signaling proteins, so AMPK and P38, and those two proteins basically inhibit/blunt that mTOR pathway, which is induced during resistance training. So, the two proteins there are P70 and 4-EP1. And so basically, if you're wanting to, like we're going to do weights, we want to maximize that muscle protein synthetic response. If you're then going and doing an hour of cardio afterwards, you're basically, just think of it like you're turning down the volume on muscle proteins synthetic response, and you're turning up the cardio signaling response. So if you can, it's better to spread them. Granted, if you do a leg session and then you go and sit on the bike for 15-20 minutes, you just flush some blood out of the legs and obviously do a bit of active recovery. That's a bit different to if you're going to go and then do an hour on the step or something of that nature. So to summarize, if you can split it, it's going to be more ideal. But if you had to do it, I would do the cardio first and weights afterwards, in terms of not blunting those responses, but equally after that is you're expending energy, and that is likely going to compromise output. So yeah, if you can, it's better to just split them. So do one in the morning and do one in the evening.
Like, this is going to maybe just a little bit more detail. I think maybe part of the question would have been like, if you don't have a lot of time, how can you maybe best maximize your cardio? So like, what types of cardio would you say? Let's say you had an athlete, Scotty, who was like, all right, I've got kids, I work full time, I'm going to do my weights in the morning. I can give a solid 90 minutes to that. And then I've probably only got a good 15 or 20 minute window at night. What maybe suggestions would you make to one of your athletes who was in that sort of position, who really was poor on time purely because of their lifestyle and everything they're trying to manage? What would you maybe suggest would be the best bang for someone's buck with limited time?
Yeah, so you could look at a different training modality. So something to do with high intensity based work. So rather than doing 15 minutes on a stepper, maybe you're doing 15-second all-out sprints with a 3-to-1 ratio. So 15 on, 45 off, and you do 15 max efforts. You might get a bit more expenditure, or maybe it's just 15 minutes at 140 BPM, shooting for something like that to get the greatest amount of expenditure. Obviously, with that, the trade-off is that you accumulate, potentially some additional systemic fatigue. But equally, you could also use that as an opportunity to sleep low, so you can further deplete, glycogen stores and induce lipolysis. So a session like that, and typically this is something that we would do with fighters if we're trying to get them to make weight, where they perform a glycogen depleting session of an evening. After their session, they would have some protein, and then they basically sleep low, and then they would wake up fasted, with the exception of maybe a protein feeding, and then again do some cardio low, so that from a biochemical perspective, you're maximizing, oxidizing free fatty acids as opposed to using carbohydrates. So there's pros and cons to both. Again, it would depend on the athlete. If that's the only option that you have, like if someone said to me, I've literally got a 15-minute window, then I would be giving them 15 minutes of just all-out expenditure if I could. But even then, in that amount of time, best case, what you might be able to expend maybe 200 calories, which in the scheme of things is not a huge amount from a fat loss perspective. So that, I would look at other ways throughout your day that you can build in additional expenditure. If it's when you go to the supermarket, park further away, don't take the elevators, take the stairs, move to a standing desk instead of a seated desk, because you'll expend more energy standing versus sitting. So there's lots of different tools that you have in the toolbox to lean on. But if we're talking about this specifically, that is probably the the path that I would recommend.
And just to clarify for people listening about sleeping low, you meaning by your glycogen levels being low?
Yeah, so in sports science terms, not in bodybuilding terms, but if we were talking about sleep low, train low, recover low, we're talking about like you guys have heard me talk about, and this is one of the other benefits of doing your cardio. And I get asked this sometimes, why do I make my athletes do their cardio in the morning and usually doing it fasted? Because their last meal of the evening is usually a lower carb meal. So they'll sleep low, which means that they then wake up low and they'll train faster with the exception of protein. They'll do their cardio. And the reason we do that is we've spoken about the heightened response. So we see those two signaling proteins, AMPK and P38, MAPK, they are basically like, they're signaling proteins to the master regulator, PGC1 alpha, and that's the master regulator of mitochondrial biogenesis, which basically just means that it helps you build more mitochondria or make your mitochondria bigger. And bearing in mind that they are what produce ATP. So ATP is the body's energy currency, and so they allow us to produce and make more energy. So if my athletes, not only are they obviously inducing lipolysis in that state, but they're maximizing that response. And so people might say, well, why is that benefit to a physique athlete? If they're able to build more mitochondria or to make their mitochondria bigger, then the applicability to their resistance training, in theory, they should be able to train harder for longer. And so from a muscular endurance perspective, there's definitely some benefit to that, at least I believe anyway. So it's another opportunity for you to be able to employ that strategy. But yeah, when you hear the term sleep low, train low, recover low, you're talking about low carbohydrate availability.
Awesome. All right. Next one was, are sweats normal in the back end of prep? I find I have to sleep with towels as sheets. Sweating towards the back end of prep. Did you notice any difference, MG?
Nah, man. And I'm not a massive sweater anyway. I certainly feel like I have an elevated body temperature at periods. When I train, I do eventually start to sweat, but I don't sweat very, very easily. It certainly wasn't something that I experienced in a prep, but I've certainly had athletes who have given feedback about sweating. Scotty can probably talk on, maybe the scientific reasons as to why it's happening. Have I heard it before? Definitely. Has it happened to me personally? Absolutely not. I'm not sure if you've experienced it yourself.
No, again, I'm not a big sweater either in general, even in hot weather. Like even when I was in Thailand, I'm not a big sweater at all. So I didn't experience it during prep. How about you, Scotty? Do you hear about that at all? Sweating increasing in the back end of prep?
No, I've personally not suffered from it, and I've only ever really had one or two, and they were perimenopausal, which is obviously one of the symptoms associated with that. So I don't really tend to see it that much. If you did, sometimes it can be as a result of consuming too much sodium, because obviously we excrete sodium in our sweat, and so it means that you've had a really, really high sodium diet. Sweating is a way of removing some of that, as well as obviously, excreting it in your urine. So sometimes there's something in that. It can be spicy food sometimes too, if you're
the old chili bag.
Or bed. Well, this is the thing. So as physique athletes, a lot of the time to try and curb hunger, and there is research to support making something taste really strong or spicy can potentially, blunt some of those, or it can help with appetite suppression. So, sometimes people may do that, and then maybe that causes them to get the sweats. Like I said, I haven't seen a lot of it and I've personally never experienced it. I'm like you, MT. I'm not typically a sweaty man, but yeah, I know some people who do report it, and so for me, they're the first things that I would look at, like from a diet perspective. What's the seasoning? Where's your sodium intake at? And potentially your sleeping environment too. Maybe it's, you've got a really, really heavy blanket. Looking at trying to be cool, things of that nature.
All right, sweet. Next one is, will competing in season A or autumn qualify you for the July Nationals, the Winter Nationals? So we just released recently the dates for the mid-year season next year, the winter season. Mm-hmm. And obviously we've got a Nationals during that time, which is in Melbourne. And we've got 2 qualifiers that you need to do if you don't live in Melbourne. And this person's asking, if you do a show in season A in autumn, do you qualify for the Nationals in July? No, you have to do a show in that season to qualify for the Nationals in that season. Mm-hmm. So that's the rule that applies across any season that we do. Yeah. Some tips on removing tan in back-to-back shows. Scotty?
Sauna, sweating it out.
Yeah,
Warm water, sauna, exfoliating. I think baby oil is meant to be really good as well, but basically doing everything you can to try and get it off.
there's some good tan removers that require you to sit and soak in a bath. I think the more time spent submerged in water is really, really good for removal. And one of the things that I've always done is sit in the bath with a tan remover, and every 5 minutes try and take a little bit more off, let it soak, try and take a little bit more off. But yeah, being fully submerged definitely helps.
Yeah, I think also don't be too aggressive with it, because otherwise you will irritate your skin. So it may take a couple of goes in a bath or in a sauna over a couple of days to get it all off. But yeah, just be patient with it, because the last thing you want to do is to irritate the skin. And then when you put the next tan on, you've got blotches and red rashes and things like that.
I think, having seen athletes do it for a long period of time, those that, prioritize doing it in the first couple of days and get the bulk of it off, you don't really notice, the little bits that are left over. Once that next coat goes on properly, the tanners are pretty good at covering that up.
Yep.
Yeah, your only typical problem areas, again, which, don't really adversely affect the presentation of somebody's physique, are things like elbows, knees, and hands, and feet. And again, no one's really looking at your elbows when you're up there posing. So yeah, don't stress too much about those. Just focus on the key areas, which are obviously legs, back, and midsection.
Yep. All right. This one's going to be for you, Scotty. What happens if you eat too much protein? Does your body turn it into fat, or do you just poop out the excess?
So protein as a macronutrient is a little bit different compared to fats and to carbohydrate, because if you have an excess or an abundance of it, your body can't store it. So it just basically is metabolized no different to any of the other substrates. So, people say, oh, you can't store protein as fat. If you eat enough of it, you actually can. But in terms of the metabolic pathway, once you've, exceeded that threshold of what your body needs, basically it just undergoes deamination and transamination. So the amino acids get broken down, and they get broken down into amino acids like in an individual form, and they basically just enter the Krebs cycle, which is like if you were going to talk about glycolysis or carbohydrate metabolism, they'll basically just enter, depending on the amino acid, that Krebs cycle, and they'll be filtered through just like if you were having carbohydrate or fats.
Can we let's go into this a little bit deeper. I had a consult with someone the other day who'd worked with a different coach, who's a female sports/fitness competitor who's probably about 60 kilos, and they gave me a bit of a run through on a previous diet in prep where they were on 240 grams of protein.
Wow.
What would you say to that, Scotty?
Well, protein from a macronutrient perspective, yeah, we want to make sure when we're in an energy deficit that we need sufficient protein to prevent, loss of fat-free mass. But equally, protein has a higher thermic effect of feeding as well. So the cost of metabolizing protein costs the body more. But equally, as far as getting energy when you need it, like I've just mentioned, once those amino acids undergo transamination and deamination, they're going to enter the Krebs cycle regardless to be metabolized. So they basically are converted to either pyruvate or acetyl-CoA or even alpha-ketoglutarate. So they'll basically make their way into whichever portion of the Krebs cycle. For those who know, it's just, other people might know it as the citric acid cycle. And so basically think about it like a big clock. And so it has different entry points throughout that. And what it does is it basically produces, without getting too nerdy, it produces, think of them as like little bags of energy that then go on to the electron transport chain to produce ATP, right? And so they basically allow us to produce energy. So in order for us to metabolize carbohydrate, it enters into the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle. And then from there, you produce the proteins that you need, NADH and things of that nature, to go into the electron transport chain. And then you produce ATP. And that's how we basically get energy. And so protein goes through that same process. So some of you will have heard of glycolysis, lipolysis, breaking down carbohydrate. And so when we're talking about using non-carbohydrate sources, gluconeogenesis. So an example like this, we're having too much protein, your body senses that. And so what it does is it has a process to break it down. And obviously when we're consuming a high protein diet, we obviously produce the urea as well. So obviously we're getting rid of the ammonia within the diet as well, and your body excretes that. You get rid of that through your urine. And so any additional, like the calories, I feel like a lot of people think that, oh, it's protein calories, it doesn't matter. They're still calories, so they still contribute, because again, once your body has the excess amount of amino acids, once it has what it needs, it just sends it through that other pathway. So it's like, no, we don't need it on this side. Turn to the left, it'll make its way into the Krebs cycle, and it will just be processed, and it will make its way and go through that pathway to produce ATP. No different to how carbs or how fats would as well.
Yeah, I think people need to realize that if you're overeating on your calories, you're going to be gaining weight, whether it's from all protein, all carbohydrate, a combination of all three, one higher, one lower, it doesn't really matter. If you're in a surplus, you're gaining weight, and if you're in a deficit, you're losing.
And I think the other thing with that sort of a high protein diet, the other thing that can be quite problematic is the delay in gastric motility. So yes, it has a larger thermic effect of feeding, but in terms of getting good data on your scale weight and how things are trending, you're likely going to see a reduction in bowel movement consistency and regularity. And so you may find that you go to the bathroom every 4 days. People that eat really, really high protein diets also are prime candidates for halitosis. So that there are some definite negatives of following too high a protein diet. Like I said, you're producing lots of ammonia. Yes, your body excretes it, but you still need to be mindful of that. So I think as a golden rule, if you're having, we now know like 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight is sufficient. If someone's dieting, I think a nice easy blanket rule is 2 grams per kilo of body weight. Yeah. Not to say that you can't go upwards to 2.5, but if you're talking about how much did you say your client weighed?
3.5. It was 3.5.
Yeah, like that's pretty hardcore. And unless they're a really massive human being and they've just got an abundance of muscle that they need that amount, again, 1.6, is kind of a generalized number. People that are bigger are probably going to need a little bit more. But yeah, 3.5, that's pretty high.
It also comes down to, food variety too within their diet. Having that much protein and, to offset the calories so you're in a deficit, it means that your fats and carbohydrates have to be pretty low to be in a deficit. Your food variety wouldn't be that much. So, that's the reason why we do have that balance, that you do have to have the other macros there so that you can actually have some variety to your food.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen that that UK bodybuilder? And he says, I had fish and a rice cake.
Yeah.
Had some fish. And then before I go to the gym, I'll have a rice cake and then I'll have my fish.
Yeah, that's been around for years, that one.
Yeah.
He just popped back up recently. And he's obviously, now he's a coach and he's just so much more educated, and he's definitely been enhancing. He's quite large these days.
Yeah.
He talks about how little he knew back then and how bad it was.
Yeah, we've all done dumb things,
Yeah.
All right. Have you ever had a client that when they contacted you, you were extremely excited to work with them? Someone you knew was a freak and couldn't wait to start training them? I know we've probably all had what people will call freaks. Are you more excited when you get contacted by a freak, or is there just anyone in general or any type of client that you're more excited to work with than others?
I get excited by everything, man. The freaks don't come up as often, and yes, there's a potential to do good at things like show, but I think there's so much great potential for growth and progression with somebody who's just starting out their comp journey to be able to have an incredible before and after transformation as well. So, and don't be deluded in thinking that sometimes, from a coaching perspective, someone who's brand new and starting out can be unbelievably adherent and easy to coach, versus having someone who may have a freak physique, but he's very much set in their ways and, likes to challenge you on everything. So from a coaching aspect, it can go either way, but both typically get me pretty pumped up, man.
What about you, Scotty?
Yeah, I don't really get overly excited if I'm working with someone that's already, maybe established and being like, now I can make them even better. I probably tend to enjoy it. For me, it's more just if there's an athlete that is just so passionate and is willing to learn and just wants to be better and will do whatever it takes. If I'm like, I think we should do A, B, C, D, they're like 100%, like there's no resistance. They just, the type of athlete, someone like, say a Riley Timsy who just lives, eats, breathes, just wants to be the best that they can be. that sort of athlete for me, because I enjoy it, because I know that dedication and that passion, it's a two-way street. So straight away, we have common ground versus someone that they may have all the talent in the world, but you have to bust their chops. And equally, sometimes you feel like, it's an arduous task to get them to do A, B, C, and D, because they're like, well, really, I've never had to do that because I'm already great. So I probably tend to, it's more so the individual and the personality and their values in terms of how they approach it is something that I probably get a little bit more attracted to from a client-athlete relationship.
Yeah, for me, I get excited with those that come to me and I can see that they maybe haven't been doing things the most optimal way, and they just have so much potential, and you're like, oh my God, once we get started, there's going to be so much progression and improvement. That's the ones that I get excited about, when I can just see that, okay, this is going to be fun. We're going to start to see some really, really good changes because we're going to be doing things that are going to be more beneficial towards you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go to the next one. This is in a similar vein. Do you ever look at athletes in natural feds, and based on their age, growth, density, thickness, etc., you're confident that they are fake natties? And how do you feel about that, Scotty?
No.
Never think about it? Doesn't ever bother you?
No, not really, because I see the other side. That person must work really fucking hard, and they're really disciplined. I think it's very easy sometimes to see someone and think, oh, that person just cheats, without actually respecting the hustle, the work ethic for all. I think because I've seen some just genetic freaks and guys that I've worked with from like 14 to seeing them become, some of the, like, I'll use Zach as an example, training from such a young age, people seeing him, oh, he's on steroids. And I'm like, no, he's not. He's lifting weights since he was 13 years old. He's an animal because he literally had the right information as a teenager. All he did from the ages of 14 till 21 was lift weights, eat and sleep. He did nothing else. Didn't drink, didn't go out. That was all he did. And that is why he looks like a rhinoceros. Versus, those that went out and partied and did everything, and then they sort of found bodybuilding to an extent in their 20s. So I tried to look at the positives, in any situation, as opposed to just think the worst or to look at a negative. But yeah, for me, for the most part, I would just be like, straight away, my mind starts to wonder what their training system's like, what sort of the nutrition they run, their philosophies on, training intensity and things of that nature. And equally, like, you see someone that has a crazy physique straight up, like, they would fucking train hard. Like, it'd be so cool to throw down with them and get a session and see, who takes a backward step first. So yeah, to answer that question bluntly, not really, no.
Yeah, after coaching some people that would be top level genetics, or even just knowing athletes and coaches who have top level genetics and knowing that they are legitimate naturals, it really changed your perspective of what's actually achievable. And I know for me, that definitely, we always compare ourselves to others. And then when we're getting into the sport, we're like, oh, I'm never going to be able to look like that. That guy's absolutely amazing. That girl's absolutely amazing. We're like, oh, they must be doing something dodgy for sure. But then when you actually start working with those people, or them really, really well, and you're like, okay, that's legit. Like, they're just at that level. They have those genetics, but they work really, really hard. Like, okay, it is actually possible. Not everyone can do it, but it is actually possible. And that's why you don't be quick to call someone a fake natty unless you really, really know. And you've also had the experience of, what it is like to work with someone like that too.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, MG?
Yeah, no, the same. And Scotty can probably attest to this, having competed in the IFBB. If you go to an IFBB show and go backstage and watch, some of the classic physique, figure, female, or men's physique guys pumping up backstage, and then go do the same thing at an ICN or an NBA show, and there is quite a distinguishable difference for the most part in terms of the size and the look. And having been at every federation's shows over the last, let's just say, 5 years, it's pretty rare that there's someone who is backstage and you go, oh, that doesn't look like it should be here. It just doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm. All right. Next one is, and maybe we can talk about this, Scotty, is do you recommend keto during comp prep? So keto means high fat, low carbohydrate, probably moderate protein.
I think he just rolled his eyes. I don't know whether his head tipped back or his eyes rolled back in his skull, but I think his answer was no.
Have you ever done it, ever, with any client? Higher fats than you normally would and maybe lower carbohydrate?
No, not really. I mean, some older clients, if it's females that perhaps need a higher fat diet purely based on sex hormone production. And again, there's been research to support there's benefits in doing that. But, and this is not me throwing shade at if someone wants to follow keto, I think the best diet for someone to follow is something that they enjoy and that they can sustain. So, and I tend to look at things from a mechanistic standpoint. It doesn't, like, I can't rationalize why would I want to restrict carbohydrate if I'm wanting to improve my performance, even when I'm in a diet. So when I'm dieting for a show, why would I want to compromise performance? And that those saying, yeah, but you burn more calories if you're going keto and you're burning more fat. To an extent, you may be burning more free fatty acids, but at the end of the day, and everyone knows this now, we have multiple studies to support that energy balance is king. So if I'm in an energy deficit as a result of following a balanced macronutrient diet versus following a keto diet, it makes no difference. But if I'm following a balanced diet that involves carbohydrate, I know that from a substrate utilization perspective, performance is probably going to be better because carbohydrate is the body's preferred source of fuel. And again, while we're talking about, metabolic pathways, if I consume carbohydrate, I can get those nutrients into the blood and I can get it, into the Krebs cycle to start making ATP at a faster rate than if I'm to follow a high fat based diet. But for the most part, most people that I come across that are following keto, it's because they're like, in the first few weeks, I lost like 4 kilos. Well, yeah, firstly, you depleted muscle glycogen stores, so glycogen, fluid, food volume. And I'm eating the same calories. Yeah, but over time, eventually, if someone else is in a deficit, you will end up at that same point. And equally, from a negative perspective towards it, you'll also develop some resistance to carbohydrate. So, yeah, it improves insulin sensitivity, but equally your ability to partition carbohydrate. And this is something I've never understood. I'll follow keto my whole prep, and then I do a carb up, 2 days before the show. And then I get on stage and I look like a bloated, standard, watery whale. And it's like, well, why did that happen? It happened because your body is not familiar with this pathway. And now you've decided to flood it with carbohydrate, and its ability to partition it is just not very good. So I think, yeah, for me, it doesn't make any sense on a mechanistic level. But equally, if you're someone that prefers to diet on protein and fats without carbohydrate, then do you. That's great. If you think your performance is great, I would then argue that I am 99% of the athletes that I've worked with over multiple years are always going to perform better with carbohydrate. But equally, it's bespoke to the individual and their preference. And again, that caveat that whatever you enjoy and that is sustainable for you is probably what's best.
Yeah, that was going to be my comment too. Is like, okay, in peak week, then what do you do? Are you loading fats? Like, what, are you loading carbs? And how's that going to go down when you start loading carbs after you haven't had any for so long?
Most of the time, it doesn't go well.
Yeah, and also too is
it just looks spilled.
Yeah, it doesn't go down well at all. The only time I think I've only ever used it for one athlete, and I wouldn't call it keto. I'll just be like a little bit higher fats than what I'd normally have someone on, and it's for that hormone production aspect. And normally that's what we would do in the off season too. And sometimes those people also have some kind of gut issue or intolerance. So sometimes having a little bit more higher fats just helps them a little bit more. But again, I've never worked with like males who are big. And what would you do then when they're a big human and they've got to get their calories from somewhere? You can't just keep adding fats in and fats in and fats in, because then that'll probably affect their digestion with it slowing down so much, right?
Yeah, and equally, I can't really speak from too much experience of having that approach, because I think in the past, I reckon I've maybe had 2 or 3 people who came to me keto, and then upon like dissecting why they're doing it, equally the process of how they're feeling in their training, and then they would be keto from Monday to Friday, but then when they go out on the weekend, they would eat whatever they want. And I'm like, it just doesn't make any sense. So if you reintroduce carbohydrate within the space of like 6 weeks, getting a taste of, well, I've got heaps more fucking energy, I still feel good, performance is better, recovery is better, they tend to just sort of fall in line in that sense. So yeah, I think for the most part now, because we're a little bit more as a society educated, granted there still are people who claim that, a calorie isn't a calorie, and that, if I'm having avocado 100 calories versus if I'm having 100 calories versus carbohydrate, it's different. But I think for the most part, most people, understand now that energy balance is king. And so, if you're in a surplus, whether that's coming from carbs or fats, or a deficit, either or, it doesn't really make a difference. At the end of the day, your body will respond, accordingly.
MG, ever had anyone on keto or higher fats than what you normally would?
No. I mean, I've even got a powerlifter that I coach. He's a type 1 diabetic man, and we run his carbs up super, super high leading into a comp, purely because you look at a year of his data, and when his carbs are high, his performance tends to fall in line with it. So same as Scotty, I don't see the reasoning why. Again, unless it was the reasons you guys have stated around hormone production, but no.
All right, let's finish off on this one. What are you looking for in an athlete who are in the off season and about to start prep soon? So maybe MG, what are some of the things that you want to make sure are ticked off and in place before you throw someone into prep?
Yeah, man, honestly, the biggest thing for me, and I've seen this a lot recently, even within sort of my own team, is that I'm really looking to see somebody start to transition their lifestyle from about the 2-month out mark. And what I mean by that is, off season allows for a little bit more freedom, flexibility. I've got competitors who are, say 6 weeks away from starting prep that I know are enjoying things a little bit, going out, maybe partying, drinking, and every check-in, I'm starting to remind them that prep's getting closer, and these sacrifices are about to hit. What I don't like athletes to do, and the only reason I don't like athletes to do this is because it tends to lead to failure, is go from living that lifestyle to start prep the very next week. It always tends to end bad. So I like to encourage them to start to introduce some of those sacrifices from the 8-week out mark. So by the time they get to starting prep, it's a really, really easy transition. Really, the only change that they should need to make is that their food will drop a little bit. And maybe there's an introduction of a little bit more expenditure, either by a few more steps, maybe one cardio session, whatever it is. But for the most part, the lifestyle's already there. Where I see big issues with competitors is they compete, they reverse out, they go into their off season, they're enjoying off season so much that they pretty much are ready to flick the switch from the last day of their off season to prep and have a completely different lifestyle overnight, and it never eventuates that way.
Yeah, I could not agree more. How about you, Scotty? Anything else?
No, that's pretty much it. I think, and this is one of the reasons why I'm such a big advocate of a pre-preparatory phase. It's the diet before the diet, but it's also establishing some habitual foundations that you're going to be adhering to for the next year. So things like MG said, in terms of alcohol consumption, if you're a serious physique athlete, you shouldn't really be drinking much alcohol anyway, because we know that it does negatively affect performance. It affects lipolysis. It affects your body's ability to accrue new tissue. So it's, I'm not saying you can't have a glass of wine from here or there, but if you're going out binge drinking, they're not really the habits that would follow or that you should be adhering to prior to starting a prep. But you're basically, like you said, you're getting your ducks in a row, getting ready to throw down, because once prep starts, it should be seamless. It's literally like everything that I'm doing last week 1 of prep is exactly the same. The only thing that is different is that I'm now eating less. Everything else is exactly the same, because your lifestyle leading into prep should be locked and solidified so that transition is seamless. Because when it's not, that's when you start to see, really, really murky waters, and that's where you start to get some turbulence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the only other thing I'll add to that bit about the environment is that also people around you know that it's happening soon, and get ready. My life's going to change a little bit. Maybe I can't go out anymore, do these things anymore, and I have to sacrifice a little bit. So just preparing people around you too, that you're moving into prep. But from a perspective of diet and training, Scotty, what do you kind of want to see before someone starts a prep? Do you want to, obviously make sure that their calories are up where they need to be, that their training performance is good, they're getting stronger, those kind of things before they even enter a prep?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things is that hopefully you've washed off some fatigue. So ideally, if you can, I like to try and plan if it's possible and it lines up. If you had a devolume week or something that's been a bit cruisy the week before, so they're just chomping at the bit to get into the gym and just really go hard and to get after it. And that's why I think if you are literally living like you're in prep, where maybe it's not even, you're not like for the few weeks before prep, you're not having off-plan meals, you're just sticking to your intakes, albeit that they're higher, because you're just developing some momentum. And the example I use, if you're doing let's say that it's a 400-meter race, right? And you start, bang, you're on the start line, and you start as soon as the gun goes off. But I start 50 meters back, and I start 5 seconds before you, and I start sprinting. And we both start at the same time, but I've already got an abundance of momentum, and my speed is much, much, much faster than yours. I'm going to be flying past you in those first, 100 meters compared to if we start at the same time. So I think that for me is just so invaluable, because if you start really well, you've got momentum, you feel good, you're starting from a place of strength, versus if you've got turbulence early on and things don't go bad, then things do go bad. It can just, it's not setting the scene for what's going to be, a really hopefully enjoyable experience. So they're the things that you're looking at. Performance should be sound. You should be injury free. Again, all of these other external factors that we've spoken about, they should be on lock, ready to go, because like you said, you've had notice, you knew that this time was coming, and it should be a really seamless transition. You're a perfect example. When you're in prep, you still go out to Mama's on a Friday, you just don't eat. You'll have a Coke Zero, you're still present, you still do all those things. No one says, oh, why aren't you eating? Because they know. Like 4 weeks out from that prep starting, when you start prep, oh, I'm starting in 2 weeks. I'm like, oh, you're not eating tonight. That's right, because you started prep. How's it going? And then it's just, it flows.
Yeah, awesome. Good to end it on that, because I know some people will be starting their prep soonish for season A. So it's a good one to end it on. All right, boys. Well, all the best for the weekend in
Thanks.
WA. Really, really keen to hear how everything goes. And we'll speak to everyone soon. Thanks for all the questions, and we'll be back next week.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy.
See ya.
Boys.